Yeah, my name is Lihalakha. I'm the acting head of the Independent Integrity Unit of the Green Climate Fund. We wanted to welcome you to the GCF Pavilion here at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Today we're here to hopefully catalyze a dialogue on the necessity of engaging with civil society organizations to promote integrity and climate action. It is the IAU's goal to take away the elements discussed here to build a framework for sustainable CSO engagement to help guard against the occurrence of prohibited practices such as fraud and corruption in GCF-funded activities. The predominant message coming out of the COP is the urgent need to mobilize resources for climate action. The GCF alone currently has over $40 billion in assets under management. And there's a continued call to bridge the large funding gap to address climate needs in developing countries. The next logical conversation is how do we safeguard these funds from loss and wastage? At COP26, the executive director of the Green Climate Fund, Yannick Glemarec, remarked on an indomitable truth: climate change and corruption kill. It is therefore our social responsibility to ensure maximum benefit of climate projects to mitigate against the issues such as corruption risk. This requires a multifaceted approach, but an important mechanism of achieving this goal is to nurture and encourage civil society involvement in climate projects. It is with this in mind that the Green Climate Fund is hosting this event with CSO representatives from Transparency International, the Water Integrity Network, the Global Center of Adaptation, and of course representatives from the Green Climate Fund. We're very fortunate to have panelists who come with extensive experience in this domain and will share some important insights on the benefits, challenges, opportunities, and practicalities of pursuing these engagements. So what I'd like to do is offer the floor to our CFO and COO, Hong Paterson, who will answer a question for me. If you don't mind, I'll read that out for you. Excuse me, I'm getting there. Okay. Historically, what has been the GCF's engagement with CFOs? Excuse me, CSOs. Maybe you can speak a little bit what our experience has been and provide a little bit of background about our work with CSOs. Over to you.
Great. Thank you, Albert. And good morning, everyone. There we go. Okay. Okay, thank you. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming at such an early hour. I'm really pleased to be on this panel. I think that the civil service societies are so important, and I was just speaking to Anju about some of the work that they have done at the early stages. And so I know that, Albert, you started the introduction in terms of our programming, but actually a lot of it also starts with the governance of our organization and the work that the CSOs really have had with us. And so it's not just about the programming, but it's the people who are putting together the programming, us and the governance that we need. And so our engagement has actually been a very, very long process, starting from the inception of the Climate Fund, the Green Climate Fund, in terms of putting together the governance documents, putting together policies, and having input in it. And it's just been so critical for us to engage with the CSOs. And I would say ourselves, it's also a very it's not always been a fun journey. I recognize that with CSOs, sometimes it's been a real challenge, but with CSOs, that is part of their role, is really to be that challenge for us, to really push us to think through different aspects. CSOs are the specialists. They're the ones on the ground. They're the ones who have been doing this and for a long time across different organizations. And so they can really see what can we learn from different organizations? How can we improve? And knowing that we are embarking on looking for solutions, looking for innovation, being catalytic, that means that we're doing things that no one has embarked on before. And so this is really important to bring everyone along the journey. So it starts with support for the GCF framework institutionally, but then also moving on to programming. And that has been really important as we started off our journey in developing projects, and what are the considerations that we have.
Thank you very much, Hong. This talking about governance, I think, leads me to the natural progression into talking about integrity issues, and that's what we're hoping to catalyze here in today's discussion. Is how do we bring CSOs into GCF activities to try and bring a certain level of integrity to our activities, make sure there's improved monitoring, maybe a little bit more transparency, so that we can now start building a framework for these engagements. What I'd like to do now is maybe turn the floor over to Brice Böhmer, who is he leads the Transparency International's effort on climate and environment, providing strategic direction and leadership in TI's work on these issues. Brice joined TI in 2012 after 7 years working as a consultant on sustainable development for the European Commission, environmental ministries, and the private sector. He is a global expert and oversees the Climate Governance Integrity Program at Transparency International. Brice's role includes managing projects of transparency, accountability, integrity in climate finance, as well as developing the capacity in implementing countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. He also represents Transparency International in several institutions, including being got a lot of feedback. So, okay. Including being a General Assembly member of the Water Integrity Network, steering committee member at the Alliance for Land, Indigenous and Environmental Defenders, as well as observer at the Green Climate Fund and the UNFCCC. Brice, what role can you see civil society playing in ensuring integrity values in climate projects? And what work is TI doing in this space?
Can you hear me? Okay, yeah. Thank you, Albert, and thanks for inviting us, and thanks for having this conversation, and that shows also the leadership of the Green Climate Fund and the Independent Integrity Units. First, I wanted to say that obviously for us, but I would hope for everyone, ensuring integrity in climate finance is a key issue, as you pointed, Albert. And I think we can't afford to lose any cent of climate finance, and at the same time we need to accelerate how much money is invested and is invested on the ground. So I think to ensure that we are building trust and that we are achieving impact, integrity is a core element of that, and can play a huge role. And when it comes to corruption and the risks of that comes with it, I mean, we have a broad of understanding of what is corruption, because we say it's the it's an abuse of entrusted power for private gain. So it's not also necessary about talking about finance. And I like what you said as well, saying that it's not only even at the implementation stage, but even before that, you know? So I will come back to that, but I think it's important to think about what we are talking about, and not only maybe losing some of the investments down the road, but there are larger issues that we see today also that are being discussed at the COP, like some of the undue influence that some lobbies can play, for example, that could delay the transition or reduce the investments or direct the investments in another way. and just to talk about also how, I mean, what we've seen on the ground, it's obviously very difficult to measure corruption or to measure how the levels of integrity as well. But what the research we did in some countries shows that indeed climate investments are at huge risks of corruption. And for example, we did a study in Bangladesh that showed that half of the climate projects and the climate investments were actually lost because of corruption and mismanagement. So there are figures that are worrying. And I think it's very key that indeed we put those governance structure at the onset. And so to come back to maybe to your question about what civil society can bring, I think in my views there are maybe three key elements. If we look at also the kind of project cycle or the kind of from the climate finance and decisions about the investments down the line to implementation and impact, let's say. So the first one is around consultation and input to project design, where I think civil society can bring there a lot. And again, when I talk about project design, it's even before the project is designed, but more also questions about what type of projects are the decisions make us pushing for, in which country, in that country, in which area, in which sectors, etc. So not only when there is a decision to build, I don't know, an energy project in Kenya, and how to do that best, but also those kind of initial questions that are quite important. The second aspect is maybe around implementation and delivery. So there again, I think civil society or civil society organizations, because there are different types of civil society with different strengths and skills, can also there help project implementation, can help around the issue of ownership. There can also support the governance aspects of reinforcing how the project is actually implemented, and also because civil society is also just a layer, so to speak, but we also have to involve communities on the ground and indigenous peoples, for example. But sometimes the civil society can be helpful in making those kind of translation, so to speak, from the different, between the communities and actors like the Green Climate Fund or entities on the ground that are accredited by the Green Climate Fund, for example. And the third aspect that I wanted to mention is around monitoring and making sure that the project is actually going according to the plans and have the impacts that it is supposed to have. And there I think civil society can also play a role, also about conflict resolution when there are some issues that are being noted or brought. So that's what TI has been trying to do as well, and making those kind of accountability lines work better from the local level to the kind of global fora like the Green Climate Fund or the COP, the UNFCCC. So we've been, on the consultation, for example, we've been indeed pushing for governance reforms, or even when, for example, the Green Climate Fund was being created, we were strong advocates of having an independent integrity unit, and I think that was a very good decision to have that. And the IAU, with the other two integrity units that are looking at the grievance mechanism and the evaluation, I think are quite powerful in the way that they are existing first, but in the way that they have also quite a bit of independence. So, and secondly, on the delivery and the implementation, it's also about raising awareness and building capacity. As I said, there are different types of civil society actors, and I'm from the governance type of actor. We're not that many, so I think it's also bringing those issues in other civil society type of actors, and also other actors like the ones actually implementing projects on the ground, for example. And we've been involved in a project with the IAU and with GIZ and partners like Binayak here from WIN to also accompany some organizations on the ground and reinforce their governance policies for the GCF project implementation. And lastly, on the kind of more monitoring and watchdog role, and I will close there, we've been also trying to use some social accountability tools. So, for example, public hearings who kind of bring together project implementers and communities, people, what we call beneficiaries on the ground, and trying to bring those together and see if there are any issues that can be resolved as well.
Thank you very much, Brice. The intervention, one of the things that you'd indicated there is the 50% loss of funding or resources. That's quite worrying. Maybe we can hear a little bit more from sector specific, and what I'd like to do is call on Binayak from the Water Integrity Network. Binayak comes from WINS. He's a program coordinator with the Water Integrity Network and has over 20 years of experience in development cooperation. His interdisciplinary work spans water, environment, climate, corruption, governance, and sustainable development. Binayak has a master's degree in water management and a postgraduate degree in environmental management. He is a Paterson Journalist Fellow, author of numerous books and articles on water, environment, and climate issues. Binayak is a founder of a news website, Sustainable Development, called 6 Degrees News. Binayak, welcome. Maybe we can hear a little bit more about what the Water Integrity Network has been doing in this integrity space. What has it been doing in building capacity? And how can we ensure that CSOs are integrity ready?
Thanks. Very happy to be here and speaking on a very important topic. First, I'd like to say that I was telling Brice, I have heard more about corruption in the bus than in this venue. We don't hear anyone talking about it. No one wants to touch it because it's sensitive and it's considered political to talk about it. But the reality is this, as Brice showed, a lot of the money which is already being invested, they're actually not going to the right place. So another 2 important points. One is that less than 10% of the funds actually go to local organizations. And among these also less than 2% actually reach the vulnerable communities. So definitely there is a huge discrepancy of how the funds are going and where they're going. Now coming back to Water Integrity Network, I think it's one of the very few organizations that looks at the topic of integrity and corruption in a particular sector. And we do look at water. We used to be part of Transparency International and we became independent in 2014. And this engagement has been very interesting and challenging because what we are trying to do is not talk about corruption because we want to engage with government agencies. And when you try to talk to them about corruption, the doors are closed. They don't want to talk to you. So we have to find other means to engage with them. And we look at integrity as a more positive approach rather than corruption. And engage more on the preventive side because if corruption happens and then you have what you call investigations, there will be reputation risk, there will be sanctioning, it doesn't help. I mean, there are numerous examples. I think a recent example going around is also around UNDP, which actually is also one of your accredited entities. So this becomes very important to look at how you put measures in place, safeguard measures in place, and this is what we try to focus on. So coming to your question, Albert, so I'll say that we have been engaging with CSOs in different countries to build their capacities, a very challenging work for advocacy on the topic of integrity and undertake projects that addresses integrity issues in water and sanitation sector. This includes developing a common understanding around the subjects of integrity and TAPA, what we call TAPA as transparency, accountability, participation, and anti-corruption, a framework we use, TAPA, We all hear about we need more transparency, we need to be more accountable, but the reality is we don't know how to do that. And this is the challenge we have to deal with. It's a very abstract area. Then, given that corruption is a sensitive topic, as I mentioned, our approach is to take the route of integrity. And this is how we try to look at the preventive side. I want to share a small example. We work with one water utility in a country. And when we started engaging with them, it took us almost 1 year before they agreed to work on a project which we called integrity management for improving their services. They said they are willing to work on the project, but they will not like to call it integrity management. They would like to call it performance improvement. So that's how we started engaging with them. 2 years down the line, we had a global conference last year in Bonn, and the deputy managing director, woman, that also I would like to mention, she presented and she talked about corruption. So this is a change. First they don't want to even engage, and then like through systemic, time-taking engagement, they are actually doing that. And we have champions. That's also something very important. Integrity champions you need to find within these organizations, within government agencies. Now, one of the approaches we have adopted is to tap into CSO network. That's another thing. I think Brice touched a lot of the issues, how we engage, but I wanted to touch on another one called network. Because a lot of the CSOs on the ground, they engage through networks. They come together for collective action. And it's a good way to engage. And for example, in Kenya, we work with the Kenya Water and Sanitation Network, KWASNet. And in Bangladesh, we actually developed an integrity network. We call it the Bangladesh Water Integrity Network, where we got different organizations, CSOs working on the ground together. And that helped in boosting the advocacy around it. So what do? They engage with government agencies and officials, parliamentarians and ministers to raise the need to strengthen integrity in policies and processes. CSOs also engage with media to raise awareness of issues around integrity. Over time, it has resulted in establishment of media-moderated roundtable dialogue, for example, in Bangladesh. In Kenya, the water regulator has taken on the responsibility of introducing integrity management processes across various counties. Another part is, this is more looking at the preventive side, but what probably GCF would also like to see is, can there be some kind of a monitor, watchdog on the ground? So CSOs also share with us incidences of corruption if they come across, but without a full investigation or evidence, it is difficult to vouch for the cases. I think this is important to note. Many times they can share with you information, and how it is to be dealt with is something to be looked at. Sometimes CSOs engage with local journalists and are able to dig out issues of corruption. In one country, they built evidence that led to an investigation and sanctioning by the Anti-Corruption Agency for a climate adaptation project. So we, and from Water Integrity Network, we provide relevant tools, content, and train them to act as integrity coaches and agents in a country. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Binayak. We do appreciate that. It's very interesting that you mentioned the capacity building elements, because one of the drivers for the IIU and the GCF is to start working on building the capacities of our stakeholders, counterparts, and now we start this conversation with civil society organizations. I know that we've worked with you and with TI on several initiatives, and we hope to continue doing that here in the years to come. But what I'd like to do is maybe shift focus a little bit and focus more on a local level. And I'd like to introduce Anju. Anju, welcome. Anju has significant experience advocating, she's got significant experience and works locally with a global lead on local-led adaptation at the Global Center for Adaptation. She has worked at the United Nations Environmental Program, International Institute for Sustainable Development, Oxford Climate Policy, Oxfam, Great Britain, and the Center for Science and Environment. She's an affiliate researcher at the Stockholm Environment Institute, Oxford, and has been a visiting fellow at the International Institute for Environment and Development. We're glad to have you. Anju, if you may maybe elaborate a little bit, how can we catalyze local ownership for community-based anti-corruption initiatives? What are some opportunities and some challenges that you envisage?
Okay, Albert. So I'm going to turn this around a little bit and say to you that, in fact, when we're talking about integrity, it's not only about corruption at the local level. So, as he mentioned, I work on locally led adaptation, and we've had several conversations these past few days around here to say, when we say local leadership of climate action, what does that mean? How is it different? You know, we've been talking about community-based, etc. And one of the key factors there is the shift of power. It's you're shifting the power from the people who've currently held it, and that's usually the people that have the hold over the money and make decisions on how the money is used, and the people who don't have that decision-making power. So it's sort of shifting power. So what I'd like to put to you is that integrity and accountability applies not only at the local level, but also to the GCF to start off with. And I'm going to share two stories with you. So, so I would say, I actually had to look up the meaning of integrity right now, I have to admit. And it says a sort of moral authority, right? So I think it's important for the GCF to be able to say that we have the moral authority to say that our funds reach the most vulnerable, that they are used most effectively. I think that is also a part of integrity and accountability. So two stories I'll share with you, one from the global level, one from the local level. When the Green Global Environment Facility started in the early days, they were quite proactive from the very start. They had an NGO network. It was an NGO network that had a space at all the council meetings, at the assembly, so they would meet with the council members, they could talk to them. And it was great because they actually funded these people to come to the meetings in Washington to, you know, stay and present. What they didn't fund, however, was for these NGOs, mostly national level NGOs. It was on a regional basis to do the homework at home, to see how GEF projects were doing, and then bring that information right back to the council to say, this is, okay, I can say to you that the money is being used well, there's no corruption, etc. So the NGO network, after a while, got frustrated and went to the executive, I think he's called the CEO or executive director, yeah, and said, we need more money. We need to be able to do this homework back home to come and talk to you. And he said, I can't do that because the moment I give you money, you work for me. And that's not what, you are the watchdogs. You need to be able to sort of come and tell me when we're going wrong. And I have to tell you that after he left and, you know, there was another CEO and they did start giving money to the NGO network, that did end up happening. You found that it was a less effective NGO network, at least in my personal opinion. So that's one story, and let's put that aside and come back to it. The other story is in India. We have the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, which is, I think, one of the world's biggest social welfare programs. So, and it's very devolved. So basically what it is that money goes from the center, there's a fund, through the states to the local level. There's a list of activities, but it's completely up to the local actors to decide. It's an employment guarantee scheme, so people in lean times get paid for the work they do, right? So they do whatever public works that are meant to benefit, and they get money for that. You can imagine the level of corruption when this started. Massive, you know, huge amounts of money. People you know, using equipment to do the work and then pretending that it was paid for, etc. But they didn't sort of just come down heavily and say, okay, you can't do this, now we're going to start centralizing and managing this. What they did instead was they adopted a system of social audits. In Hindi, it's called Jan Sunwai. So Sunwai in colonial times used to be when people went to power to be heard, right? So they went and said, I have this problem. Jan Sunwai is really interesting because it turns it around. It's where power comes to be accountable to people. So it was a very simple system there. So they said all the money that goes down to states, 2% will be set aside, no questions asked, for an independent organization whose job it is to go down to the village level every 6 months, spend 3 days auditing accounts, jobs, works, etc., and then hold a Jan Sunwai, a public hearing. where all the villagers come and they testify. So it's like, I was meant to have received so many days of pay. This was the job that was meant to be done in my land. Did it happen or did it not? So it immediately sort of brings it to the people. And that was so successful for this one program that they now have it, I think, for about 10 public social welfare programs in India, right? So what I want to say to you is that when you put those two together, on the one hand, the institution or organization that's sort of managing integrity and accountability, I think that on the one hand, we have to recognize that it's also the integrity and accountability of the GCF, that you need to make sure that it's you're accountable to the vulnerable communities, your funds are being used for them, that there is flexibility in the context of climate change. It's not just a question of sort of doing something in the end to say whether the funds were used well and there was no corruption, but it's been doing it continuously to make sure that as and when it happens, there's course correction, that, you know, things can be corrected. So what I'd say to you is that we have to take a far more systemic approach to it. Perhaps it's a good idea, and we have to invest in it. Accountability doesn't come cheap. It's not a last minute something that it's a tick box activity, right? It's something that we have to invest in. Systems have to exist. We could have a similar system where we say a certain percentage of GCF funding for projects is set aside for this kind of very systematic accountability, but with the independence for the organization or institution that does it, that they are not accountable to the government, that they can speak truth to power. So their money is not tied to what they say. So that on the one hand. And I think that we need to sort of try and have incentives for people who come to us with projects to build these kind of social audits into their programs, to say that, you know, if you do something like this, you will get the extra funding that you need for it. So what we would like you to do, and the way now it's worked out in Narega is that on the one hand, there's a national system that's already paid for, and it doesn't cost very much to do for other programs. On the other hand, they've built local capacity. So they have what they call, I think, Jivika Didis, sisters, so to speak. So it's women who get paid as grievance officers at the local level. So if there's a corruption problem, if somebody feels they're not sort of, this process is harming them, they're able to come and tell these, they complain, and then they have the power to take it up. Because it's literally about this imbalance of power, that you're not going to be able to deal with corruption unless you're able to deal with that imbalance of power, unless these grievance mechanisms exist where the corruption is going to happen. So what I would say to you is that we can't depend on the goodwill of civil society to do this for free. They can't do a good job of it. They've already got their plate full. They're already strapped for funds. We'll have to invest in it, and it'll have to be a far more systematic approach that we need to follow. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Anju. That is a very interesting premise that you bring, because one of the things that the IAU is hoping to do is to establish a sort of working group to try and identify some of these issues and find a mechanism to bring civil societies on board and have them be more effective in project monitoring. Having spoken about some of these issues locally on a more macro level, what I'd like to do is welcome Yannick Glemarec, our executive director, to join us and maybe offer a few words on integrity issues and our civil society organization involvement. Welcome, Yannick.
Thank you very much for inviting me to say a few words of closing remarks for this event. I would like to deeply thank all our panelists, as well as the Independent Integrity Unit, for organizing this second event. The corruption kills, and not figuratively, literally. And what are some of the immediate impacts of corruption on our fight to avert catastrophic climate change? The first thing is that corruption destroys trust, destroys social capital. Corruption weakens the legitimacy of public policies. And in climate change, we will have to basically go through 4 gigantic transitions: the energy transition, the food system transition, the infrastructure transition, and the ecological transition. we will have to ensure that this transition are just, are fair. And when you have no legitimacy for your climate policies, you are simply going for a disaster. The second thing is that's more well known. A lot of our investment will have to be in infrastructure, will have to be in asset creation, and it's traditionally an area that is plagued by corruption. Climate-friendly infrastructure will be particularly vulnerable to corruption. Why? Because by and large, we know how to design an infrastructure in a stable climate. You have basically 300 years of established track record, and you can simply have a look at the cost and say, that doesn't seem right. Or you can have a look at the proposed infrastructural design and say, no, that doesn't seem right, because you have a huge built-in knowledge that enable a competent engineer immediately to say, there's something there. It's not the case when we speak about climate resilient infrastructure. We are basically speaking about new climate solution, and we simply do not know how to optimize the design of infrastructure in times of climate crisis. We will have to take risk. We will have to try new design. And if already it's very difficult, it will be extremely difficult for the asset managers, for the engineers, for the financiers to get it right without corruption. To get it right with corruption will be impossible. And the net result will be that rather than, for example, defending 50 kilometers of coastline, we will defend only 5. And we will expose all the population for the remaining 45 kilometers to extreme weather events. Another reason why corruption can basically ruin our effort to avert catastrophic climate change is basically in terms of transaction cost. When you don't have trust, you will not decentralize decision making. And why we know that it's extremely important to decentralize decision making, to decentralize finance. In the absence of trust, in the absence of system, there will be a tendency for almost every single government, every single financier to say, okay, I want to control everything because I'm not so sure about what will happen. And last but not least, there is a huge climate finance gap. And we have to address this climate finance gap. Only one, but one of the barriers to this, bridging this finance gap is basically the risk of the perception of corruption risk. Every time there is a perception of corruption, basically the price of money increases. So rather than having access to capital at, let's say, 8%, for 10 years, suddenly it will be 12, 14% for 5 years. And a project that was bankable at 8% for 10 years is no more bankable at 12% for 5 years. And therefore, we are not even speaking about 5 kilometers versus 50 kilometers. We're speaking about 0 kilometers at all. It's one of the most powerful tools that we have in our hands to scale up climate action is actually integrity in climate action. I started by thanking our independent investigation unit for this initiative. They started this work last year, and I would say this initiative will definitely make GCF a more responsive, a better partner for everybody. I've taken note of the suggestion of empowering civil society to work with communities, and I have to say that I will have to do a little bit more thinking about it, but it's a very stimulating, very interesting suggestion.
Thank you very much, Yannick. Now, if I may just pose one more question to you, because we've got this large funding up, we've got a lot of urgency for climate financing. Do you feel that the the climate space is ripe for corruption? Do you feel that there's more corruption opportunities there?
Yeah, I think it's. There is more opportunity for for corruption because we have to test new design, new approaches, new business model. We have to test new climate solution. And as I mentioned before, when you're speaking about extremely well-established solution, you have a huge track record that enables you to immediately assess whether the price is right. Because we are condemned to innovation, we are condemned to do business differently in times of climate crisis. We do not have this body of knowledge that enable us as an heuristic immediately to say, this is not right. I double check that one. Plus the importance of policy legitimacy. When you are basically going through, you will have to go in 20 years, 30 years through what basically has taken 200 years in different jurisdictions. If you do not have legitimacy, if you do not have for your policies, if you do not have the capacity to ensure that the transition is fair, the likelihood that you will achieve your goals is extremely low.
Thank you, Yannick. Maybe if I could transition this to Brice, the next question. What are some of the obstacles that we can expect to have in putting together integrity mechanisms to guard against corruption and fraud and other prohibited practices? Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on your thoughts.
Thanks, and thanks, Yannick, for putting this because I think we all agree probably to what you said and the importance of integrity, but I think those connections are not made by everyone and by all actors. So I think it's very good to hear from you that this is how you see things. I think, and I mean it's also based. I mean, building on what we said. I think one obstacle is first. The first building block of integrity is transparency, access to information. If we want civil society and all necessary actors to actually act upon, we need that information. And sometimes it's very hard, or very often it's very hard. And that was also one of the first push or challenges, as you said earlier, when we were in conversation with the Green Climate Fund and others, is be as transparent as you can. No, we need to have access to that information, and I think a lot has improved also down the line. But we need to continue pushing for best practices in terms of how much information is available, even before projects are approved, and how much information is available in the country, how much information is available at the community level on the ground. So I think this is the first building block. The second one is about accountability and decision making. So once civil society has the information, what are the channels to bring that information? And I think this was the example also with the Jeff. But how much the voices of civil society or indigenous peoples are heard in the decision-making bodies, and I think there are still some challenges to that. I think of course the funding question is always an issue. So at the moment, for example, the Green Climate Fund is not funding observers to come, but I think there is more space as initially at the Green Climate Fund board meeting, for example, to hear civil society. But usually it's too late, and for example, projects are already being kind of set and approved. So I think here we can still improve the way and the channels. And I think, Albert, it's great to hear from you that this is also the vision of the IAU, who wants to establish those channels, with civil society. And I think that's very important. And the final one is, unfortunately, we need to be mindful also of the civic space. There are some very problematic correlation between the levels of corruption and the rule of law in the country, or the levels of corruption and the number of killings of environmental defenders and whistleblowers in the country. So, the Green Climate Fund has a whistleblower protection policy, for example, and this is important to make sure that this is implemented on the ground. So I think for actors like the Green Climate Fund being mindful of those questions, being mindful of the specific corruption risks, that exist in specific countries, in specific sectors, in specific situation is important. And yeah, again, views the compliance mechanism and whistleblower protection is really crucial in that respect.
Thank you very much, Brice. What I'd like to do is maybe take a few questions from the audience. Is there anybody that will go with you?
Hello. Hello. Yeah, I am. Sorry, I'm Usman Muhammad from Nigeria, from the Center for Renewable Energy and Action on Climate Change. We are CSO member to GCF. Yesterday I was in this pavilion in the evening. There was some discussions related to this, but I'm lucky to be part of this this morning. There was this corruption in developing countries is so pervasive. It's everywhere. We cannot deny the fact that there is little checks and balances from these donor agencies that make sure that the money given to these developing countries are being checkmate down to the impact it has. I could remember recently we had this project. It's just 29,000 euro, but the impact it has is so enormous. With the little money we have, we were able to construct a clinic, a solar-powered clinic, a 3 kilowatt solar panels. We integrate, we provide 4,000 liters of water through that same project, and we also provide like an agroforestry training center with all these projects. So if government will construct something like that, 100,000 euro cannot do it. So value for money, GCF should look at value for money, very important. That's one. And another issue is corruption in developing countries through GCF, NGOs through GCF could have in terms of making sure that those monies that are meant for local authorities, local governments are being implemented. So this is just my opinion, but there are other issues that could come off later during. Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose the first thing I wanted to say was that we all know civil society is not homogenous, so we should avoid speaking about it like it's one coherent community. And I think some really pertinent examples of that are, the absence of solidarity from the international civil society movement towards national civil society movements. I come from a humanitarian background predominantly, where there is no solidarity there, and actually there is institutional withholding of power and finance. But I was really interested to hear the Transparency International definition of corruption is not just about the financial aspect of it, and it's about abuse or misuse or mischanneling of power, because there is that, theft or fraud, as we normally perceive corruption, is one way that climate finance disappears, but the other way is, I think you mentioned transaction costs. So I wonder what the sort of broader or more holistic Transparency International definition of corruption means for the way that international climate finance flows around the system or doesn't flow around the system. In many cases, it flows around a few actors within the system, and we might say, oh, there's this much money in Somalia, but actually the money is sort of swirling around Somalia within international bank accounts and international organizations, and all the same people are getting paid. And the transaction costs of every interlocutor take more and more money off. And some interlocutors are much more expensive than others, and they're intergovernmental organizations and pooled funds of banks and humanitarian agencies. And so that reduces massively the amount of money they can get to the ground, but also that's where power is, and it's a withholding of power, I think. It's like serious reform of the way that international climate finance, development finance, and humanitarian finance flows around is needed, because right now it is withheld. So I think we find it really easy actually to talk about the corruption of recipient governments. We're like, oh, well, if it goes here, they might take this or that. And actually we might be better served by acknowledging that this should be more of a dialogue that international actors would approach with a bit of humility about our role in it and considering the power dynamics we have. Maybe we don't perceive it as corruption, but we're withholding power, influence, and resources. So how much credibility do we have to sit down and talk about integrity when, 60, 70, 80% of money that might be announced here for a particular fund will never reach people in Somalia, Senegal, Honduras? So, yeah, I don't know, big question to ask you at the end of a session, but that's something that I think we need to be talking about if we're talking about integrity.
Sure. Maybe, Binayak, did you want to provide a response?
Yeah.
Sure.
So, no, that's a very interesting point about international organizations, international CSOs and the local CSOs. I think this is one of the big challenges. And we working on the topic of integrity and engaging with a lot of international organizations and also locally, what we realized is that when you talk of integrity, I mean, as I mentioned, it's sensitive corruption. These organizations are also very hesitant, reluctant to engage on this topic for various reasons. One, they don't want to destroy their bilateral relationship with countries. Two, they try to touch only on the softer aspects of governance and not go into the hard aspects of how you can actually address. For example, how can you improve human resource management? How can you improve management and leadership? Can you get the right people in the place? They don't want to touch these because these are sensitive. And then another point is what they do is then they start shifting the narrative, and then the focus on corruption gets diluted. And this is happening quite a lot. Whereas when we talk to the local CSOs, they very much want to engage on that because it's them who are suffering. They're with the communities. But this is one of the, what you call gaps, which probably we need to see how it can be fulfilled.
Thank you, Binayak. I believe we have a question from the audience.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a comment related to according to what my brother here has said regarding the civil society partnership. I work with civil society. I'm a lead scientist now at the University of Minnesota. I work with government. I work with the World Bank. But I think that the leaders of change on climate is civil society. The civil society has human capital that government sometimes doesn't have. And that capacity that exists, especially in developing countries, is underexploited. And they're ready at a very minimal cost. They can lead the change that is. I think what is needed in many countries is a civil society strategy, or especially on climate, that government can help to coordinate. Civil society organizations are struggling a lot. Even the ELCO meeting that was held in the Gambia, we had to pocket our own money out to pay for that conference. And the ministers had to come just for political reasons to get the visibility. We did not put in any dollar into that. We could have, that conference could have been better organized. That's just an example. But I think a civil society strategy, and it gets to the grassroots. So grassroots ownership takes place when you have the civil society leading the change. So I just want to say that the funding mechanisms have to be in such that civil society capacity is built, but also civil society can access funds through simple and structural ways. Government can still coordinate. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question.
Hello, good morning. I'm Nadej Zoyen from the Rainforest Alliance. Yes, I think that civil society organization plays an important role on direct impacts at the local level. And what we notice is that a mechanism for civil society, example, if I take the Jeff Small grants, it's really important, but the amounts are very low for real impacts. You have projects 6 months, 1 month, 6 months to 1 year, maximum 2 years, when you are talking about the small grants. How can we expect to have good impacts at the local level with this short-term fund for the civil society and really reduced amounts? In your speech, you were saying that we cannot expect civil society organization to work for free. It is true. We are not working for free. So when we are developing mechanism for funding civil society organization, we have to make sure that people working there will also receive good wage for the work they are doing. It is part of integrity. If we at the international organization, you are earning lots of dollars per year. We cannot expect civil society organization earning tips and expect that we are improving integrity in what you are doing. So I really think that we have to increase the percentage of funds that really goes to civil society organization. Simplify mechanism, because when you take the green climate funds, for example, you have the roads to civil society, you have at least 5, 6 there. And how can we have significant amount of funds for real impact at local level? So that is my contribution. If we can make things easier, ensure that the budget are consequence for real implementation, removing these unbalance, I can say that international organization, yes, you earn much more, and local organization, those who make real impacts at the local level, they are earning 20% less than other, 20 times or 10 times, sorry, less than others. That is the reality, and we are really sorry about that. If you can improve it, we will have impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I'll ride on the previous speakers. They've said everything, but my sitting here listening to this talk was, how do we even begin to talk about corruption when the fund is not there for civil society? I think they've actually spoken to it, but also I think grassroots people should not be seen as only recipients, but also participants in the fight to corruption. So when we talk about who is receiving the fund, how do we involve? We should ask also, how do we involve the grassroots? Because they're the people that civil society, international organization are doing this work for. So I think maybe thinking forward in the future, how do we go to the grassroots and ensure that the grassroots are actually stakeholders and not just seen as recipients of everything else we're doing? Thank you.
Yeah, hello. My name is Kay. I'm from Transparency International Madagascar. So it's the link between international movements and local CSOs that we are doing the work in this anti-corruption. What I wanted to say is that beyond the very important comment and recommendations on funding, on the need of increasing funding for civil society, I think that there is also a huge need for building together a strategy for ensuring this transparency around climate funding and all climate actions that are going right now. So this strategy, because some of us, civil society, are not really aware of what is going into the climate change sphere. It is the first time I'm going to COP, for instance, and I'm still discovering things. While Madagascar is one of the most hidden countries by climate change. So there is a need of this information, a lot of information to give to civil society so that we can rely this information to the grassroots level, as she said, but also like durable and sustainable action, joint action that you as Jeff and we as civil society in all countries can do together to mitigate corruption. We have to strive for more integrity, but striving for this also means we have to stop all kinds of kleptocrats who will eat the fund for mitigating climate change. You also have to convince all the rulers, people from the government, to have more integrity in their behavior, because they are all coming here making great statements, but once back home, you know what happened, and we know and we live what happens. So we need more commitment, but more joint actions as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We've got another question.
Hi, good morning. My name is Matilda. I'm from Singapore. I run an NGO called Ocean Purpose Project, and we are creating both deep tech technologies, converting ocean plastic into hydrogen, but we also work in low tech, low cost things such as working with smallholding farmers to grow seaweeds that absorb chemical pollution and then turning that seaweed into bioplastics and biofuels. one of the difficulties that we experience is that we don't fit in the typical mold of civil society or NGO. We do campaigns and activism, but we are trying to integrate with commercial operations, with industry, with creation of new market products and services. So could you share with us what do you think are some of the aspects that the Green Climate Fund or some of these financing options can do for companies like us? When anybody looks at us, they are like, you are a social enterprise, you are NGO, what do you know about deep tech? And, you just do a social media campaign, it's good enough. But when we speak to commercial operators who say, what are the tangible solutions that you can propose for energy, for fresh water, for jobs, livelihoods, gender diversity, then this is again where we say we have low-tech, high-tech solutions. So how do you think, companies like us, the disruptive NGOs or the new kind of startup that is really trying to balance purpose and profit, how do we feature into some of these financing options? Thank you very much.
Please, Hong.
I like how Albert looks at the CFO and says, can you please answer that question? The commercial one. So thank you for that question. I think that in terms of the way we work on a partnership basis. And so we have our accredited entities. Within that, they will then assign executing entities. And it feels that, I think that that's maybe where organizations would work directly with you in terms of execution. There's also the aspect of delivery partners. But probably in terms of the space that you're looking at and the space that you cover is really the executing entity side of things. So that's a very direct response on that one. I think I wanted to just kind of address some of the remarks that we're hearing in terms of engagement with the CSOs and trying to work with people all the way down to the grassroots level and really understand how do we ensure that what we're trying to do gets to the very bottom line. So, I had mentioned this at the beginning, and I think Yannick more eloquently talked about this in terms of what the GCF is trying to do. The innovation that we go into, it means that there is no precedence. And, similar to money, corruption finds the shortest way downstream. Very, like water, money, the fastest route downstream is the way corruption will find its way. And I think that that's something that's really important for us to acknowledge as we go through our journey. As we embark on our second replenishment, and certainly the CSOs were so supportive of our initial replenishment at our inception, really creating those frameworks, supporting us in terms of looking at those policies, looking at that governance. And then as we grow, I think this is where it becomes even more critical to have an engagement plan with the CSOs. I really like that idea of being much more structured around how we engage. I think that the work that the Independent Integrity Unit is engaging with the projects, and a lot of the conversation that we're having here is really about that transparency, but the availability of information. You can only be transparent if you have that information, and you can only be transparent if you can give context to that information. And so with the technology and the developments around that, how do we really understand what's happening? Then how do we loop that back into better programming? And as we grow our portfolio, it's going to become more and more critical for us to do so. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to engage much more in a much more organized manner with CSOs in order to do this.
Thank you, Hong. I believe Yannick had a few thoughts he wanted to share as well.
Thank you, Albert. Just to highlight some of the options that we will have to support, for example, a program to convert ocean plastic into hydrogen, or to leverage the capacity of seaweed for bioremediation. We have a number of social impact investment funds. For example, if you go to our website, I would suggest that you go to an agency called Acumen. And because Acumen is one of our social impact investors. And with Acumen, we have a $56 million fund for adaptation solution. And we provided 25, they mobilize the rest on their own. And this fund will provide equity to micro, small, and medium enterprises to ground truth their solution, and after be able to go a banker for commercial debt. So my first recommendation would be check one of the projects of Acumen, and we have a couple of social impact investment funds that support this kind of solution. A second option is our expanded direct access opportunities. What we do there, we recognize that we are a very large fund. For example, we are involved in multi-billion dollars infrastructure de-risking. So only the title is not user-friendly. And the size of one of these multi-billion dollar de-risking project, only the document is 1,000 pages. So recognizing that we need to find a mechanism that is much more civil society friendly, we have developed something called the expanded direct access. What we do is that we finance a pool fund, let's say $25 million. And these $25 million will in turn be broken down in, let's say, 100 grant of $250,000. What we did in the Federated States of Micronesia is that they had the National Climate Fund, very well organized, good and granting processes, ensuring a high likelihood of integrity. But they did not have a penny in the National Climate Fund. So there we capitalize the National Climate Fund. And if it works, we will certainly repeat it in a different number of countries. The decision making to break the money, the $25 million into grant, is delegated to the country level. And so there it could be another avenue. In Vanuatu, we basically are partnering with Save the Children Australia for a similar fund, and we rely on Save the Children Australia to basically break them down. Another thing that we do to support activities that are between basically community grant and social impact investment is that we provide dedicated credit line to local banks. So as long as they finance this kind of initiative, they have from us a credit line at, let's say, 2% return. And because they can charge a higher interest rate, this should compensate for the risk, but give access to local organization to finance for long term and a very, very low cost. So we have a series of mechanisms. We are, as part of our efforts to strengthen integrity, we have invested a lot in basically uploading the information, transparency. And you can basically look at any of our projects, any of our accredited entities, and that's the first port of calls that I would recommend.
Thank you, Yannick. Brice?
Maybe just to respond to a few comments, and I mean, I see we are also running out of time, so that might also be my my concluding remark. But just to say to the few comments, I mean, to the gentlemen that were talking about the endemic levels of corruption in developing countries, I just want to say that corruption is everywhere. So it's also in developed countries. And the issue that I was talking about in my initial remark about undue influence, and I think you also kind of touched a bit about those type of corruption. I mean, corruption takes many different forms. Undue influence for us is also a form of corruption, and this comes mainly from the developed countries. So just so that it's also clear. And of course, I mean, I think as several comments pointed out, it's about power, it's about access, it's about equity. You also refer to, you know, where is the money going? I mean, Binayak, you also talked about, you know, how many percentage is actually flowing or reaching the very ground. We saw that as well. I mean, I remember it wasn't the Green Climate Fund, it was before, but a big project in the Maldives where, you know, basically most of the funding was going to found international consultants who were staying in resorts, costing a fortune, developing solutions who were actually not useful and not used by the communities. So basically, and this is also a form of corruption, and it's not only about losing 20% or whatever it is of the funding, but it's losing the whole project because it's ill-designed or ill-implemented. And finally, I mean, I really like also Anju, what you said. I mean, the linking to the question of monitoring costs. It would be also my dream what you described. So having in all the projects 2%, 5% dedicated to independent monitors. And I think, I mean, talking about also the private sector, or the question from Madame regarding the CSO or private sector, I think also private sector is of course very key. And at TI, we developed a model that we call Integrity Pact that brings together like a project implementer, for example, private sector entity, the public entity, or it can be a fund, for example, the funding entity, and an independent civil society monitor. And those three pledge for integrity, and the project implementer pledges as well for giving access to this independent monitor throughout the project. So that's something that we could talk about. I really hope that we could do that with the Green Climate Fund, actually, because of the scale of the investments, as you described. So that could be exciting. And I think also, Yannick, when you talked about, you know, the risks of corruption and why climate finance is specifically at risk. One reason being there are new institutions, it's complex issues and so on. New institutions mean also opportunities for doing things differently. And I think the Green Climate Fund is showing some of these ideas of how we can do things differently and not do the same mistakes that we did in the past, for example, with development finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brice. We've got just a few moments. Did we want to have any wrap-up comments? Maybe Anju?
Thanks, Albert. I mean, I'll just use the last few minutes to make a plea to the GCF. This is a really important issue. This is at the heart of your effectiveness at the end of the day. So please think about it and put in a system that's institutionalized, that's systematic. In the past, we rely on civil society too much without actually investing in them. And there are problems, as we've heard in the audience today, that often they become a fig leaf of sorts, because we say, we have civil society coming to all our meetings, they have access to our information, we've done our job. But in fact, the civil society that makes it to these meetings are not the kind of people that will be able to tell you whether you're being effective on the ground or if funds are being siphoned off. So the people that you need to invest in and you need to bring to these meetings are those local NGOs that have those kind of insights, that have the ability to dig out this kind of information. So be very sort of systematic and think about this in the long term, because your investments could help countries build capacity to root out corruption in the bigger context as well. So if we make these kind of investments in these watchdogs, in these kinds of bodies, I think that the impact will be beyond even climate change. So I'll leave it there, and I wish you success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anju. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today here with the IAU's civil society engagement. We will take the lessons learned or comments taken from this engagement, and we'll start implementing and building a program around civil society engagements. So I wanted to thank the panel for being here, and we do appreciate the comments and insights that you've provided. And I think with that, then I'll wrap up our excuse me, engagement. Thank you very much.